Right now, your heart is beating. It has been beating since before you were born. Around 100,000 times a day, over 36 million times a year. And it does this without a single conscious instruction from you, through every night of sleep, every morning commute, every unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. The heart never stops. So here is something worth understanding. What actually happens when it begins to fail? Not when you die, but in those critical minutes before, when a crisis is already unfolding inside your chest and you may feel almost nothing at all. Because a heart attack does not always arrive with a crash. Sometimes it is nearly silent, and that silence is part of what makes it so dangerous. By the end of this, you will understand exactly what is happening at the biological level during a heart attack, and why the body sometimes causes additional damage in the very process of trying to save itself. Let us start with the basics. Your heart is a muscle. Like every muscle in your body, it needs oxygen to work. It gets that oxygen from blood, delivered through a network of vessels called the coronary arteries. These arteries are remarkably adaptable. They widen when your body needs more blood flow, and ease back when demand is low. But over the course of a human life, and this is where the story of a heart attack begins, something starts to happen inside those vessels. Fatty deposits accumulate inside the artery walls. This process is called atherosclerosis, and it can develop silently for decades before anything goes wrong. When one of those deposits becomes unstable and ruptures, the events that follow can unfold with alarming speed. To understand a heart attack, we need to go back sometimes decades to a process happening inside the artery wall itself. The inner lining of every coronary artery is coated by a single layer of cells. These layers are called the end. When this layer is healthy, blood glides over it without friction. But the endothelium is sensitive. High blood pressure stresses it. Cigarette smoke damages it. When it happens, LDL cholesterol particles accumulate in the bloodstream. Some of them begin to seep beneath the endothelium and into the artery wall. The immune system responds. White blood cells called monocytes migrate to the area. They transform into macrophages and begin consuming the cholesterol particles. This is where the problem deepens. The macrophages take on so much lipid that they become dysfunctional. They swell into what researchers call foam cells. Unable to escape the wall. Over time, this creates a core of fatty debris and dead cell material. The body tries to contain it by forming a fibrous cap, a thin layer of collagen that sits between this volatile interior and the flowing blood above. Under normal conditions, the vessel may look almost normal. Blood is flowing. The person feels nothing. Here is a detail that surprises most people. The heart attacks, most likely to be fatal, are not caused by the largest plaques. Research has consistently shown that smaller, thinner-capped plaques are the most dangerous because they are the most likely to rupture. The threat is not always about size. It is about stability. The trigger can be subtle, a surge of adrenaline during intense exercise, a sharp rise in blood pressure, an inflammatory response to an infection. Even waking up in the morning when the body releases cortisol and blood is temporarily more prone to clotting can be enough. When the fibrous cap ruptures, the contents of the plaque are suddenly exposed to circulating blood. What happens next is one of the fastest biochemical responses in the body. Blood contains platelets, small, disc-shaped cells whose entire purpose is to respond to injury. The moment they contact the exposed interior of the ruptured plaque, they activate. They change shape, becoming sticky. They cluster at the site and release chemical signals that summon many platelets. At the same time, a process called the coagulation cascade begins. A chain of proteins activates in sequence, each triggering the next, until the end product fibrin forms a mesh that reinforces the platelet cluster into a solid clot. Within minutes, this clot, called a thrombus, may partially or completely block the coronary artery. The body's clotting mechanism exists to protect you from bleeding. Here, it is blocking blood flow to the heart. The medical term for what follows is ischemia, from the Greek. It means to hold back blood. It describes a tissue that is oxygen deprived, but not yet dead. The heart muscle cells downstream of the blockage, called cardiomyocytes, are among the most metabolically demanding cells in the body. They need a continuous supply of oxygen to keep contracting. When that supply is cut off, they begin to struggle almost immediately. Within seconds, the affected muscle switches from its normal efficient energy process to a backup system that does not require oxygen. This backup process is far less efficient and produces lactic acid as a byproduct. The buildup of lactic acid in the tissue is one reason some people describe the sensation as a deep pressure or heaviness in the chest. Within 4 to 6 minutes, if blood flow is not restored, the cardiomyocytes begin to die. This is permanent. Adult heart muscle cells cannot regenerate. The region of dead tissue, called the infarct zone, will eventually be replaced by scar tissue that cannot contract. Studies estimating the rate of cell death during a coronary occlusion suggest that millions of cardiac muscle cells can be lost with each passing minute. The principle is consistent. The longer the blockage persists, the more extensive the damage. This is why the phrase used in cardiac emergency medicine is so direct: time is muscle. And yet, despite everything we know about this, many people wait hours before calling for help. Sometimes, days. Part of the reason is that the symptoms do not always match what most people expect. Films and television have shaped a very specific idea of what a heart attack looks like. Chest discomfort is the most common symptom, but it is often not described as pain at all. Many patients describe a sense of heaviness, pressure, or tightness, which is easy to explain away as indigestion, anxiety, or the result of a strained muscle. In a significant number of cases, particularly among women, older adults, and people with diabetes, chest discomfort may be entirely absent. The heart attack may instead present as unusual fatigue, nausea, breathlessness, discomfort in the jaw or arm, or simply a feeling of being unwell that the person cannot quite explain. The reason chest pain can radiate into the arm or jaw involves the architecture of the nervous system. The heart shares sensory nerve pathways with areas of the body surface. When cardiac tissue is distressed, the brain sometimes maps the signal to the wrong location. The heart is the source of the pain, but the jaw or inner arm is where it is felt. Studies have also found that a substantial proportion of heart attacks produce no symptoms at all. Some research suggests close to half of all myocardial infarctions may pass without the person knowing, only to be identified later by an ECG or other test. This is the reason symptoms alone cannot be relied upon as a diagnostic tool. The body does not respond to a heart attack passively. It activates its emergency systems immediately. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Adrenaline is released. Heart rate climbs. Blood pressure rises. From an evolutionary perspective, this is logical. If the heart is under threat, pump harder. During a heart attack, the logic backfires. A higher heart rate means the heart needs more oxygen, exactly the opposite of what the ischemic tissue requires. Higher blood pressure adds to the workload of a muscle that is already struggling. There is also a serious electrical risk. Ischemic heart muscle cells become electrically unstable. The careful balance of sodium, potassium, and calcium ions that normally governs each heartbeat begins to break down. Dying cells send abnormal electrical signals to neighboring cells. This can trigger irregular heart rhythms ranging from mildly disruptive to immediately life-threatening. The topmost dangerous of these is ventricular fibrillation. In T state, the heart no longer beats in any coordinated way. It simply quivers. Without defibrillation, ventricular fibrillation is fatal within minutes. It is the leading cause of death in the acute phase of a heart attack, often occurring before the person reaches hospital. This is why bystander CPR and access to defibrillators matters so much. The electrical crisis can kill faster than the blockage itself. Now here is something that took cardiologists decades to fully understand. When blood flow is restored to a blocked coronary artery, whether naturally or through medical intervention, that is not necessarily the end of the damage. Many times, that is when a second wave of injury begins. It is called reperfusion injury. The oxygen-starved heart muscle cells have spent minutes, sometimes longer, in a state of stress. Their internal chemistry has shifted. Calcium regulation has been disrupted. When oxygenated blood suddenly returns, the mitochondria in these already stressed cells produce a rapid burst of reactive, oxygen-spacious, highly reactive molecules that damage proteins, membranes, and DNA. At the same time, Calcium floods into the cells in concentrations they cannot handle. This triggers a process called hypercontracture. The muscle cells contract so forcefully that they rupture themselves from the inside. Then the immune system arrives. Inflammatory cells flood the area, drawn by the signals of injury, causing a third layer of damage. The treatment restoring blood flow can itself injure the heart. The goal of the cardiologist is therefore not only to open the artery, it is to do so in a way that limits the damage the reoxygenation process causes. Researchers have spent decades looking for ways to reduce reperfusion injury, through techniques that gradually reintroduce blood flow and through protective drug strategies. Progress has been made, but this remains one of the most active areas of cardiovascular research. The heart, it turns out, can be damaged by the act of saving it. The benchmark that drives cardiac emergency care is this: time is muscle. The longer a coronary artery remains blocked, the larger the region of permanent damage. Every minute matters. This is why emergency cardiac systems are built to minimize the gap between symptom onset and treatment. For ASTEMI, a type of heart attack caused by a complete coronary artery blockage, identified by a specific pattern on an ECG, the standard treatment is a procedure called primary percutaneous coronary intervention. Majority of people know it as angioplasty. A thin catheter is inserted through a small puncture in the wrist or groin. It is threaded through the arterial system, guided to the heart, and advanced into the blocked coronary artery. A small balloon is inflated to compress the clot and reopen the vessel. In most cases, a tiny mesh tube called a stent is then deployed to hold the artery open. When this is performed within 90 minutes of symptom onset, the clinical target, which is known as door-to-balloon time, outcomes improve substantially. This is one of the genuine success stories of modern medicine. Primary PCI has dramatically reduced death rates from heart attacks over the past 3 decades. The limitation is that it depends entirely on the patients seeking help promptly, which brings us back to the variable and often misleading nature of symptoms we discussed earlier. The biology of the treatment is sound. The human factor remains the most difficult variable. Surviving a heart attack is not the end of the story. In the weeks and months that follow, the heart undergoes a process called cardiac remodeling. The area of dead muscle is gradually replaced by scar tissue, fibrous collagen, that is rigid and cannot contract. The surviving muscle compensates by growing larger. The left ventricle may change shape over time, becoming less efficient as it adapts. In some patients, this remodeling eventually contributes to heart failure, a long-term condition in which the heart cannot fully meet the body's demands. Modern medications, including ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, and aldosterone antagonists, can slow this remodeling process significantly and improve long-term outcomes. But they cannot reverse the fundamental biological change. The scar tissue stays. The lost cardiomyocytes do not return. Researchers are exploring whether stem cell therapies or cardiac tissue engineering might one day restore some of that lost function. Results so far are cautiously encouraging, but adult human hearts have almost no natural regenerative capacity. Unlike, for example, the hearts of zebrafish or newborn mice, which can repair themselves after injury. This is one of the more striking biological trade-offs in human physiology. The heart is built for performance and longevity. In exchange, it gave up the ability to heal. Cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death worldwide. The World Health Organization estimates it accounts for around 17 million deaths each year. In the United Kingdom, roughly 100,000 people are admitted to hospital with a myocardial infarction annually. These numbers are not random. They reflect, in significant part, the biology of how people live. Diets high in ultra-processed food promote the kind of inflammation and lipid imbalance that feeds atherosclerosis. Chronic psychological stress from financial pressure, social isolation, overwork sustains elevated levels of stress hormones that damage blood vessel walls over time. Physical inactivity removes one of the strongest protective factors known. Poor sleep dysregulates both metabolism and inflammation. The biology of a heart attack, traced back far enough, is connected to the conditions of the life in which it developed. Plaques do not form in isolation. They form over years, shaped by its environment. Genetics, and circumstances that are not always within individual control. It is worth acknowledging that when we discuss cardiovascular disease as a public health problem, individual choices matter. But so do the environments in which those choices are made. Access to healthy food, safe spaces for physical activity, economic stability, healthcare. These shape cardiovascular risk in ways that biology cannot fully separate from sociology, and yet the science of prevention is genuinely encouraging. Statins reduce major cardiovascular events substantially in higher-risk individuals. Blood pressure treatment has lowered rates of stroke and heart failure. Stopping smoking, even in middle age, measurably reduces cardiovascular risk within a relatively short period. Sustained exercise, even modest amounts, has a meaningful protective effect on the heart and vessels. The tools exist, the science supports their use. The challenge is access, equity, and sustained application. We began by asking what actually happens during a heart attack. The answer involves decades of silent biological change inside artery walls. A single moment of rupture, a biochemical cascade that unfolds in minutes, a body activating every emergency system it has. And then, when help finally arrives, the unexpected challenge of protecting damaged tissue from the very oxygen it needs to recover. It is a remarkably complex sequence, happening invisibly, often silently, in a chest that may feel nothing out of the ordinary. Your heart has been beating throughout this entire video. It will continue beating tonight while you sleep. It will beat 4 decades more. If things go well, it does this without instruction, without rest, without recognition. We tend to think of the mind as the seat of everything that matters about us, our memories, our decisions, our sense of self. But the heart has been quietly recording a different kind of history. It holds the physical evidence of how we have lived in the elasticity of the vessel walls, in the presence or absence of plaques, in the scars, if any, that remain from events it has already survived. Perhaps what a heart attack ultimately reveals is this, that the organ we think about least is, in many ways, the one that has been keeping track all along.